Wouldn't that be great, though, if that was the same for like normal real life STDs? Is if you killed the person who gave you the STD, then the STD would go away.
That I would love that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I'd be in prison, but
I feel like there'd be less STDs in the world.
And less people.
Yeah. It's a win-win.
Remember when we first met John McClane? Argyle picked him up from the plane and took him down the Nakatomi Tower at the Christmas party. And the terrorists were overzealous, but it was sweet when they killed Ellis. And with a little help from Alan, John McClane kicked ass.
Welcome back to Shat The Movies, the podcast where we answer the question, were the movies we love and growing up really that good? Have you ever caught yourself thinking, why don't they make movies like they used to? Can you still remember spending your Friday night searching for the perfect movie rental at Blockbuster Video? Do you even remember what Blockbuster Video was? If you answered yes, and this is the podcast for you, I'm one of your 3 co-hosts, Roger Roper. And alongside me are my 2 co-hosts, Big D, Dick Ebert.
Good evening.
And Gene Klatuverata Lyons.
Give me some sugar, baby.
And each week we take a look back in time and decide if our favorite films still hold up. Each week the audience selects from 6 movie choices that we then break out a race car VHS tape rewinder and watch the movie that tallied the highest number of votes. At the end of the podcast, the 3 of us will provide you, the audience, with the number of wipes each movie would take to get off your respective butts. So thank you so much for listening. If you have not already, hit that subscribe button and share with a friend. It's how we help the podcast grow. You can also check out our sister podcast, Shat on TV, where we review television series such as Westworld, Taboo, American Gods, Game of Thrones, True Detective, and Watchmen. It's coming up, boys. Watchmen. At the end of the month, you can download Shat the Movies wherever you get your fine podcasts. That being said, Big D, we are in the midst of our Halloween Shat the Movies Spooktacular, where the next 2 weeks we are going to be reviewing Halloween movies, spooky movies, scary movies from the 80s and the 90s. And we're making a little money because people are writing in and they want us to commission during the Spooktacular. So this week, we're doing a commission, and I think next week is also a commission as well, right?
No. This just happened. It was perfect timing.
Okay.
One of our listeners, Chris Powers, he listens to a bunch of the TV cast. So he, a while back, said, I want to commission a movie. And it just happened that it perfectly fit a week before Halloween. So the Spooktacular starts this week with Chris's commission. And then next week is the voted category for the movie. There were 6 of them up there. But yeah, Chris threw in some money and he said, you guys have to do the 1992 Army of Darkness.
Well, anyone who listens to the podcast on a regular basis knows that when people commission the movie, we ask them to write in a little bit of a letter, give us some background of why they sent 3 independent podcasters their hard-earned dollars. And Chris also sent in a letter. And Gene, you're going to read that now.
That's right. So Chris wrote in, hey there, Shat crew. First off, thank you for doing all that you do. I've really enjoyed listening to hours and hours of your commentary and insights. The first movie I'd like to commission, that's good, he wants to do several, is one of my favorites, Sam Raimi's Army of Darkness. I first saw this movie in 1993. I must have seen this at least 4 or 5 times in the theater, dragging more and more friends to the theater to see this movie. Yes, they're still my friends. Something about the idea of a modern day person, Ashe, being transported to a fantasy realm to fight the dead just made my 1993 brain spin. I'm also a sucker for a time travel movie. More commissions on the way in that regard. So Big D's going to love that.
Yes.
And Ashe is 100% quotable in my book. I love the practical effects. I think this was K&B Effects' first movie, and today they're the ones that do the makeup and effects to The Walking Dead. It's just a fun movie, and it's right up my alley. Finally, when my kids were old enough, I showed it to them. My girls were 11 and 12, and my girls now know where I get a lot of my bad dad humor. And yes, they love the movie too. At least that's what they tell me. This is a half-wipe movie in my book, but I think this will be a 3-wipe between the group. Thank you, Shat Crew, for the review, and I hope you enjoy the movie. Chris Powers.
You know, that's interesting because we've received commissions, multiple commissions. This is the first time anyone's actually predicted what our Shat score would be before we dive into it.
Yeah, I think it's a bold move. And if I can actually start right now to campaign for Chris, he likes time travel movies with like a modern twist. I think Time Rider, The Adventure of Lynn Swan from 82. Perfect commission. He's riding his motorcycle through the desert, stumbles upon a scientific experiment. Boom. He's back in time, Midwest, on his motorcycle. Chris, this is right up your alley.
I love how you're gaslighting the audience now. You're making it whatever you want this podcast to be.
I thought you were going to go with Time Cop. I was going to be like, Big D, we've already done it. I know it's the greatest time travel movie ever made, but splits all night.
Well, Army of Darkness is a 1992 American horror film directed and co-written by Sam Raimi and stars Bruce Campbell. It is the third installment in the Evil Dead franchise and follows Ashe Williams, played by Bruce Campbell, as he is trapped in the Middle Ages and battles the undead in his quest to return to the present. Army of Darkness was released in the United States on February 19th, 1993. It grossed $21.5 million over its $11 million budget and received mostly positive reviews, though notably less than the first two films. Since its video release, however, it has acquired a cult following. Along with the other two films in the trilogy, the film was dedicated to Irvin Shapiro, who died during the film's production in 1989. Bruce Campbell did win the coveted Fangoria Chainsaw Awards for Best Actor in Army of Darkness. We always kick off the podcast by answering the question, where were you? What are your memories when you first saw this movie? Or what are your memories of this movie? We'll start with you, Big D.
So this was the first time I've seen any of the Evil Dead series. It just never appealed to me. They seemed stupid. They seemed unoriginal. And what I think I hate the most was that the fans of the movies were like, oh, Ashe is the greatest. Ashe is so funny. It made me actively not want to watch it. I love Rick and Morty. But if I just heard people doing Pickle Rick, I would never watch the show. So that's what Ashe was for this. And this was the first time I've ever seen it.
It's funny you bring that up because Raj was trying to get me to watch Rick and Morty for the longest time. And he kept saying the two things that everybody else was saying too, which was, I'm Pickle Rick. And it's so smart. The writing is so smart. It's so
that I did say.
Yeah. Don't say no. You dressed up as Pickle Rick for Halloween.
I dressed up as Pickle Rick, but I also know that that's just like kind of a one note and dumb people like Pickle Rick because he's like, oh, Pickle Rick.
Yeah, not like the other smart people who love Rick and Morty. For me, when I first moved back to Arizona in 2013, there was a video store that I used to go to when I was a kid called Video Paradise. It was, I don't know if you've ever been there, Raj, but it was this huge video store in Chandler. It's like takes up like half a strip mall. And I was excited that it was still there. And I went and I got a card. And like it was still the same stoner dudes like hanging out there, but now they're like in their like late 30s, 40s. And I was so like at home there. And I remember that they had this cult classics rack and Evil Dead, the original Evil Dead was on there. And I picked it up when I was 16 years old. And this trip back to Video Paradise took me right back there. I was obsessed with seeing all the cult classics at that time. So it was just a cool thing to do, right? It's like the mid 90s. You're in high school. It's like Clockwork Orange, Meet the Feebles, Dead Alive, Eraserhead, The Evil Dead. Like all those were movies that you had to see as a part of that cult classic, library. And I honestly didn't like most of them. I pretended like I did because all the other goth kids and all the other alternative kids really liked these movies. So I act like I did too. But Evil Dead had something special. And I think it was Bruce Campbell that set that movie apart from everything else. So I eventually saw both Evil Dead 2 and Army of Darkness on DVD. But what had happened is I kind of mushed all those movies together in my head because the story is just, it just kind of flows very easily. And then last week I saw Evil Dead the Musical, which was put on by the Brelby Theater Company in Glendale, Arizona. And so that blurred it up even more because they mix elements of all three movies. So this was very helpful to revisit Army of Darkness on its own without the entire trilogy and really judge it on its own merit as a standalone.
How was the musical?
Oh, the musical is fantastic. It's
really?
It's maybe Evil Dead 1. And the best part about it was they promised the audience that they were going to go through a couple gallons of fake blood during the musical. And by about intermission, they hadn't sprayed enough people yet. So they actually like kind of changed up the show where people started coming off the stage and like into the foreground because they had so much blood left to like get rid of. And in the one scene, one of my favorites is when in the Evil Dead, when Ashe is chopping his girlfriend's head up, right? Like he's right. Basically decapitating her head that shows up in the cabin. As he's doing it, you could actually see like the hose sticking out of the box that he was chopping on. And they were like taking straight aim at people's faces and just spraying everybody with blood. So it was really fantastic. And I hear that the one in Vegas which is going on right now, is like the one to see for maximum blood.
Okay. Well, we might have to take a Shat the Movies field trip up there, get our permission slip signed, and go to Vegas to watch the Evil Dead musical. Well, like you, Gene, I did pick this movie up from my local video store in Orlando when I was, I think, in middle school. I think I was in the 8th grade. And I picked it solely because the cover art is one of the best cover arts of any movie ever made. And I remember the store clerk being impressed with my rental and asking if I had seen or watched the others, and not wanting to look uncool and desperate for friends, I lied and said that I had. And later when I returned the video, the clerk wasn't working, so I rented the other two and watched them. And I realized at that point that Evil Dead 1, the original, is vastly different than Evil Dead 2, which is closer in tone to Army of Darkness. In my opinion, and we'll get into this, I guess, in the Evil Dead 2, I think, is the superior film of the trilogy. Like most trilogies, the second one is usually the best. But I remember liking it, but I wasn't obsessed with it, probably in the same vein that you were, Gene. But I am a fan of Bruce Campbell, and you can definitely see Sam Raimi's tropes and how he's grown as a director through this franchise. So I'm really glad that this was commissioned. That being said, Big D, play the trailer.
In an age of darkness.
May God have mercy upon your souls.
Something's wrong. Something's amiss.
And a time of evil.
You shall die!
When the world needed a hero.
The swallow us all.
I don't want to die!
What it got was him.
Groovy. You know your shoelace is untied.
He's a 20th century guy.
For that arrogance, I shall see you dead.
Trapped in the Middle Ages.
All right, you primitive screwheads, listen up. This is my boomstick.
Now, let's talk about how I get back home.
Foretold by a mystical book.
Within its pages are passages that can send you back to your time.
Forewarned by a wise man.
You must recite the words Klaatu, Berata, Niktu.
I got it.
Fulfilled by a wise guy.
Klaatu, Berata.
When thou misspoke the words, the army of the dead awoke.
Now he's got a date.
Give me some sugar, baby.
With the army of darkness.
You found me beautiful once.
Honey, you got real ugly.
Sound the trumpets. Raise the drawbridge. Drop the Oldsmobile. From Sam Raimi.
Oh, that's gonna hurt!
Director of Darkman. Comes Army of Darkness. They live. They breathe. They suck. Army of Darkness.
After being transported to the Middle Ages at the end of Evil Dead 2, Ashe Williams is captured by Lord Arthur's men, who suspect him of being an agent for Duke Henry, of whom Arthur is at war. He is enslaved along with the captured Henry. His gun and chainsaw are confiscated, and he is taken to a castle.
Okay, so I've already said this is the first time I'm into this series. It's a trilogy. Right now they have a television series after, I guess. But I didn't know whether or not I needed to see the first two. So I went on Twitter and said, guys, we're going to review Army of Darkness. Do I need to see the first two? And people were split. Some said, yes, you have to. Some said no. Some said just watch two. Unfortunately, right now, the baseball playoffs are on. So last night, it was game one, Yankees, Astros. I'm like, there's no way I can do the playoff game plus the movie plus two. So in the beginning, they catch us up pretty much, right, on Evil Dead 1 and 2. Is there anything that I missed that would have made me enjoy this a little bit more?
Yeah, basically what happens in Evil Dead 1 is there's a group of kids, typical horror movie setup, right? They go to a cabin in the woods. There's like this footbridge that's the only way to get to the cabin, and it breaks. Right. And so it's Ashe, his girlfriend, his sister, and then his buddy and some like chick he brought with him. And so basically everyone one by one gets, possessed by the powers of the Necronomicon, because they find this audio tape of a guy that was studying the Necronomicon, and the trees are like attacking everybody, and you get the tree rape scene, which is still hugely uncomfortable. So it's kind of like they get new arrivals at the cabin in Evil Dead 2, but it starts out in Evil Dead 1 with the Book of the Dead being discovered. So it's kind of, that's what I'm saying. That's why I'm like, what the hell is happening in each movie? I don't remember. Because to me, it's all like one movie. And then Army of Darkness is just kind of a separate thing almost. And so Big D, to answer your question, I don't think you really need to see the first two. You know, there's a Book of the Dead. It causes Deadites to show up. That's about it.
Yeah. Well, I like Big D. I did appreciate the cold open. But that's not the same girlfriend, right? Like it's a completely different girlfriend in Army of Darkness that's in Evil Dead 2.
Because his girlfriend 1 is Linda.
Right, Linda.
He's got his girlfriend Linda, and she dies.
She dies, right.
Spoiler
she dies
alert.
in Evil Dead 2. Yeah, he cuts her head off.
Yeah.
That's right.
And that's when the hose comes out of the box in the musical and sprays everybody. So when that scene's coming up, everybody cover up.
So it's like a Gallagher show? Like you go there and they spray you with blood? It's like they smash watermelons on you?
No, we're there for the deep introspection, Raj. It's a musical too. They're singing. Anyway, all right. So we're getting back to the movie. So, I'm watching the movie again. It's been years since I've seen any of these, but I did just see the musical. And you get the opening credit sequence. It looks like low budget Passion of the Christ or something. It's clearly not in the European Middle Ages. This is like Bill and Ted's, where it's just like it's in the fucking desert somewhere in California. You're like, all right, whatever. But we get right back to Ashe, a familiar character. We're engaged. He's, to me, one of the greatest heroes in the fantasy horror genre. Big D, I think all of the praise that people have heaped upon this character is deserved. And he is the best when he's cocky and defiant. And he's bringing that attitude to the screen immediately in these opening scenes. Like, he's like, don't fuck with me. Everyone fuck off. You get that great scene of the car just landing out of nowhere, just crashing into the ground. And then Ashe is there. He's got and I think it's actually really great if you're somebody who hasn't seen this series before. You're like, this guy's like in modern clothes with a chainsaw arm. What the fuck is going on here?
Yeah. Well, this is like the legend of Bruce Campbell, right? Like a lot of people who may not have grown up or seen any of these movies would recognize Bruce Campbell from Burn Notice, or he was in the Sam Raimi Spider-Man trilogy playing different characters. And then he's all over the Comic-Con scene. And I wonder, Big D, I know you're not a big fan of Comic-Con, but Gene, you've gone to many of these fan series events. Have you ever met Bruce Campbell up close and in person?
I've never met him, but it's always because in the era that he was really showing up at Comic-Con at the same time as I was, is when they started like charging for shit. And I was like, no, thank you. So I've never actually seen him in person, but people who are friends of mine who are either deeply, deeply, deeply into horror and gore or comics, and people who are just light fans, everyone across the spectrum seems to love this guy. And I've never heard a bad word about him.
Well, I'll give you guys a fresh perspective because this is the first thing I've seen him in. He's charismatic. There is something about him. Normally when a movie starts up, I'm dissecting it. I got my pen and paper out. I'm looking for things that bother me. He sold me on it. Ashe makes me accept things that are ridiculous. He's walking around in the stocks, in the pillory. He's got no hand. Why? You need a hand to have the stocks work. I'm like, all right, I'll let that go. The group of knights don't seem to take special notice of the car other than to poke it with their swords and their spears.
That's great, though. That's fantastic. Yeah. They're just poking it.
He survives this fall through a wormhole that simultaneously crushed a car. I'll accept all that because he's great, but it's inexcusable to me. How are you captured by a group of knights when you have a shotgun on your back? He didn't even unholster the weapon.
Yeah, later in the movie, you see him like basically marshaling an entire army and teaching them like how to fight and kill. And he's just like a superhero badass. But at this point, he puts up no resistance. He just kind of like struggles a little bit. And then the chainsaw ends up on the ground. And again, talking about the car, nobody else seems to be like, whoa, what's that thing that just fell off his arm that looks like an awesome ass sword? And apparently all it takes to be a wise man in the Middle Ages is to have a gross ass beard and to notice when a time traveler drops a working chainsaw. He's the only guy, the wise man, that's like, huh, what's that?
So we talked earlier when we were reading his letter about how he wants to commission more time travel movies. And it got me thinking to myself, I just got back from England. I just got back from Germany where, their cultures have been steeped in time and, people have lived there for thousands of years. If you had to be transported back, if some sort of crazy book opened up a wormhole and spit you out into a time period, which era would you prefer?
I mean, can I go to like 1998?
Right, I guess.
I'd be 18 again. Can I just do that?
Yeah. You put down some money on Apple stock.
Fucking dope, dude. 1998 was rad.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now as an adult, I'd be a pussy. I keep thinking, well, if we go back to the dinosaurs, that's dangerous. I could catch a disease. There might be something that's going to eat me. Or medieval times, it'd be easy to get caught away from whatever time machine has sent you back. I think maybe it'd be kind of cool to go back to maybe the 20s. See early America, something that I wouldn't be totally afraid that I'm going to get found out and killed.
Yeah, I mean, typhoid and all. It's cool.
Yeah, World War I. Sure.
Good times.
I don't know. I feel like Roman times would be good. You got the bathhouses, you got the aqueducts. I would assume that as a time traveler, they would look back at me and they would say, well, this is a man of great stature, so we're going to give him land and titles, and I would be part of the Roman Senate.
Roger, how's your Italian or Latin?
My Latin, it's not very great, but there's a little bit of Catholic teachings that I could probably eventually learn.
Plus, he knows the international language.
Love.
But here's the thing that I always think about is, with all these time travel movies, the guy goes back and then he can teach people stuff and whatever. We'd all be useless. If we go back,
100%.
If we go back
useless.
200 years, I'd be like, hey, listen, cell phones. Okay, so you can have cellular phones. How does it work? I'm like, cell phones. You plug it in for electricity. They're like, what's electricity? I'm like, so
you guys got a converter?
Yeah, anybody? Okay, I got it. No, I want to talk to you guys about microbes and penicillin. All right, how do you get penicillin? Mushrooms, I think. Get some mushrooms. We're useless.
We have zero skill. They're like, okay, have you guys gone to London yet? You guys got a GPS? Who's got a GPS around here? We'd be laborers for sure. We'd be down in the bowels of the boat rowing for hundreds of years.
The only thing I think that we could share, good advice, would tell them to wash their hands. Guys, always wash your hands. Come on. We're going to cut down on disease. It'll stop the plague. I can't even make gunpowder. I couldn't even make a compass with a cork and nothing.
That's why you got to travel back in time with the Oldsmobile 88 Cutlass with a Chemistry 101 textbook in the back of the trunk.
Yeah, the problem with it is too is even if it's something simple like warning. I was just thinking warning somebody when they're going to be assassinated. So say you go back to warn Caesar or something like that. Be like, listen, beware of the Ides of March. And if when's that? I don't fucking know, man. What year? Not really sure, but Brutus, he's kind of bad.
My battery's dead on my phone. I don't even know what day it is.
God, that'd be the saddest day. When the last of your battery dies out, you're like, oh.
Well, that's why I'd put it on airplane mode. Or I take one of my old Nokia flip phone. It would last for, I'd assume, a few months. Well, Ashe is thrown in a pit where he kills a deadite and regains his weapons from Arthur's wise man. After demanding that Henry and his men be set free, he knew it had to be a witch hunt, and killing a deadite publicly, Ashe is celebrated as a hero. He grows attracted to Sheila, the sister of one of Arthur's fallen knights.
Again, Gene, you talked about Ashe as a character and understanding why people hold him in such high esteem. He's condescending to everybody he encounters. Oh, he calls them primitives. He's like, primitive screwheads, listen up. He's such an asshole. He lies. He's arrogant. But at the same point, he's also incompetent. The way he seduces women, give me some sugar baby. I thought he was hilarious. And I just found myself thinking, is Gene going to have a problem with this? Because I know he likes Ashe. Gene, are you okay with him treating women this way?
It was so abrupt that he's basically he's pushing her away, Sheila. And then as she's leaving, he gets up and goes to the door. He's like, give me some sugar, baby, which he labels as pillow talk. And here's the thing is, I'm going to go back to what I said about Jay and Silent Bob fame when we're talking about, the dogma. If you take Ashe seriously, just like if you take Jay seriously, his treatment of women is reprehensible, but I don't think he's a character that we're supposed to take seriously as a serious hero. He's supposed to be a joke. He is a joke. He's the joke. And I'm convinced based on the way he acts and, as you guys mentioned, the cover art on the DVD that The Evil Dead and Army of Darkness specifically, it's one man's delusional view of himself as a hero. This is the story as Ashe tells it. And that's why he's still working at S-Mart. That's why he's always wearing the same outfit no matter what era he's in. It's the macho id of this geek being set free. And I think that's why so many of us basement dwellers identify with this character.
Yeah, I definitely, this is how I would act if I was in the medieval time. I'd do some medieval negging, pushing him away. That's also my move, though, when I'm, you get a girl over to watch a little Netflix. and then you just you brush away their advances, and as they get up to leave, you just lay a big one on them.
How's that working out for you?
It's not going well. But there's also some homages to other movies I found out, like when he is thrown into the pit. It kind of felt like the Rancor pit mixed with the trash compactor scene in Star Wars Big D, and I didn't know if that was intentional.
Yeah, I don't think anything in this movie is trying to be new, right? They're like, okay, take every trope, it's medieval times, whatever. They're like, okay, how are we going to make Ashe have to interact with a Deadite? All right, we'll have the pit kind of like from Star Wars, throw him in there. Everything is just, derivative of something else. And you definitely see that here, but they're not trying to do anything new, right? It's more like having fun with it, having fun with a lot of these tropes. And I definitely got that sense too. The walls I was actually watching that scene going, oh, gee, if the walls start closing in right now and then they activate the spikes.
Yeah. Well, then also like he takes his belt off and kind of like in an Indiana Jones fashion, whips the belt around and it perfectly attaches itself to the rope and he gets pulled off. And it's like, oh, well, Ashe is kind of like a Han Solo, Indiana Jones. That's what they're trying to get across from a theme perspective. And I think it works, but there's also little Sam Raimi specific things that he does with his camera work that I think has spilled into some of his mainstream movies later, like Spider-Man and Spider-Man 2.
Oh, yeah. If you go back from the beginning of the Evil Dead series all the way into later works that Raimi has done, you get some of the craziest camera work you've seen. And it's done to like good effect. So one of the things that he does a lot is that first person point of view where you're seeing the combat through the eyes of one of the combatants. And what's great about it is with Bruce Campbell, that gives Ashe the chance to get wacky in his reactions. So they do a lot of that. He's doing that rubber face mugging a lot where like, oh, it's a sword coming at me or claws or whatever. And you're just seeing that. And what's funny about it is this is a much bigger budget than they had, early in the series, but they're not letting go of those like slasher horror fantasy roots of the weird camera work. And I especially love the cheapness of when they do the point of view from the weapon. So whether it's like a spear or a sword, and you're just seeing these obviously off angle thrusts at like a character while he's just going, whoa. And at this point in the movie, I'm really enjoying it. As the movie went on, not so sure.
Yeah. If you've watched the same Raimi Spider-Man, there's that POV from Doc Ock's tentacles,
right?
When they're attacking Spider-Man. And then when he does like the camera a little bit close to the actor, then a little bit closer, then a little bit closer. Like he did that in this movie as well. So all the little, it's interesting that Sam Raimi was even tapped by Sony to do Spider-Man, because like if you go back and you watch Spider-Man now, it's very campy. And it didn't feel that way when we originally watched it in like 2003.
But I think there's a fun way in that he shoots the scenes. A lot of times when we're watching movies, we feel like we're smarter than the characters in world. When that witch or whatever jumps out and she's on the ground and they think they've killed her, and we're seeing her shot from her face, and we're normally like, uh-oh, her eyes are going to open. She's not dead. She's not dead. And then you see Ashe kind of slide up behind her and he's like, don't, it's a trick. Don't touch it. Yeah. Get an axe. It's great. You could see what makes him a successful director now when he's got a bigger budget. But there was confusion in the three movies. Roger, you had written to me and said, hey, have you watched Evil Dead yet? And I said, no, we're doing Army of Darkness. There's a continuity that I think would have helped. Originally, this movie was going to be called The Medieval Dead. I think if they had done that, it would have made it clear to people who weren't already fans of the series that the three are tied together. So you had Evil Dead 2, Medieval Dead.
Or they could have called it Evil Dead 3.
Well, this is, I feel like, what Medieval Times should pivot to. I feel like instead of enjoy your horses, present them to my audience. If like in the middle of it, that just some dude dropped out of the roof with a chainsaw in one hand and a boomstick, that would really bring Medieval Times into the modern century.
Yeah, at least take a cue, from Universal Studios and just do it for October. Like just have Medieval Dead for a month. I'd go to that. I would go back. We could use your drinking horns that you paid fucking $42 a piece for. We could do that shit.
Now that you say it, I don't understand why they don't do more thematic, like Halloween Horror Nights at Universal Studios. That's what you're talking about, where they do a completely different show in the month of October. You could do the same for like Valentine's Day, Christmas, Mother's Day could be a special show, Christmas, a Christmas medieval.
Yeah.
Yeah, the problem is that their target audience is like PC gaming flip-flop dads. Like they're not going for people with really cool ideas on entertainment. They're just like, oh, look at that magnificent horse.
Presenter.
Oh.
Now are you ready for the feast?
Presenter.
I'm gonna need a horse blanket. Well, according to the wise man, the only way that Ashe can return to his time is through the magical Necronomicon Ex Mortis. Ashe then starts his search for the Necronomicon. As he enters a haunted forest, an unseen force pursues Ashe into a windmill, and he crashes into a mirror. Small reflections of Ashe in the mirror shards come to life, with one becoming a life-size clone, after which Ashe kills and buries it.
I found myself thinking I should not be enjoying this movie as much as I am. I really shouldn't be. I should be hating this, but it was fun. I think the movie really walks this tightrope between fun entertainment and annoying. All the camera tricks that you said, Gene, about the POV at the edge of a weapon or the shaky cam, that could easily become annoying. But the movie seems to know its limits. When they get the shards of glass and we get the mini ashes, I kept thinking of how much we hated the brownies in Willow. And maybe it was just because the length of it, but every time a scene in this movie got to the point where I was like, oh, they're overdoing it, they seemed to know their limits and they stopped and we just moved on. I think that's a skill that a lot of movies don't have.
Well, yeah. Again, when I think of other movies that Army of Darkness is pulling from, not only did I think of the brownies, but I also thought of like Gulliver's Travels when they tie him down and they're kind of torturing him. But when compared to the Evil Dead 1 and the Evil Dead 2, the rest of the series, did it feel cartoonish to you? Did it take you out of the movie?
Yeah, I've been a fan of the Evil Dead series since I first saw it on DVD as a teen, but this extended slapstick goofiness like wasn't working for me as an adult. And Big D, maybe it's a different experience because I've seen it before, but I almost felt bad for Bruce Campbell because you see how charming he can be and what a great lead actor he can be. And in some of the scenes, it was embarrassing the way they made him act. You know, when he's like having to fight the half clone of himself and he's like, ugh, and like punching in the face. And it felt like it took on 1 degree too much. And I guess each of us has our break point on that. But I think that part of Ashe's charm is that tightrope you mentioned, Big D, where sometimes he's a clown and sometimes he's a badass. And I don't think I care for that clown stuff, but I love the over-the-top tough guy stuff because that's funny in its own right when he's being like super tough, right? So like when he straps evil Ashe down and he's pulls up the chainsaw to dismember him, and he's like holding it up in the air, and you get the shot of just the chainsaw, like a hero image of the chainsaw, and that bloodthirsty look on his face. Which, by the way, Big D, bit of history is Ashe is kind of crazy. So in the Evil Dead, the way he lost his hand was that he got bitten by a possessed moosehead. It bites his hand. And so then his hand starts attacking him. So he's fighting his own hand. And in Evil Dead, the original, it's just a guy fighting his own hand. And that's funny. But if they had made like an animated hand, that's kind of like, I don't know, it's a little goofy. So anyway, so he chops his own hand off to basically like get rid of the possessed part of his body. And he actually becomes possessed himself like later in the series. And so there's this craziness in Ashe where he's been possessed several times. Like, and you see that bloodthirsty look on his face, and it's just fantastic callbacks to the rest of the series. I love that part of it. I just cannot stand the cartoony part. It was really turning me off at this point.
Well, when Ashe arrives at the Necronomicon's location, he finds 3 books instead of 1 and has to determine which is the actual book. Attempting to say the phrase that will allow him to remove the book safely, Klaatu Barada Niktu, he forgets and tries to unsuccessfully mumble through and cough Niktu. He then grabs it and rushes back while the dead and his evil clone resurrect, uniting to become the Army of Darkness.
That's why they call it that.
That's why they call it that. Ashe demands to be returned to his own time. However, Sheila is abducted by a flying deadite and later transformed into one.
Okay, so this movie had an $11 million budget in 92. Let's keep in mind, Terminator 2 came out in 91. Jurassic Park came out in 93. It seems like they just did not even make an effort. They didn't even try to make the Army of the Dead look somewhat believable. And I found myself going back and forth. Is this a smart decision? Did they know their limits? What were they? Would the movie have been better if they'd actually tried to make the Army of the Dead look at least consistent?
No, absolutely not. Could you imagine this movie, the tone of this movie, and the eyeballs rolling in the heads and the exploding skeletons and stuff? If they had actually made it look good, it would be such a weird and tone deaf movie and a complete waste of budget.
Yeah, because this one only cost like $11 million to make, right?
Right. So, as you mentioned, $11 million in Army of Darkness. Evil Dead only cost $350,000 to make in 81. And T2, Big D, cost $100 million. It was 10 times more expensive to make. Some other, movies that look similar to this, kind of like almost the stop motion sort of look for the skeletons, were Clash of the Titans in 81, Jason the Argonauts in 63. Well, Clash of the Titans cost $15 million to make in 1981. So it was more expensive to make than Army of Darkness. And good eye on the Jason and the Argonauts, Big D, though, because you mentioned that in your notes. That only cost $1 million to make in 63. So it was only $4.5 million in 92 money. So it looks like that's more in the vein of what they were doing here. But Jason and the Argonauts, correct me if I'm wrong, wasn't supposed to be funny.
No, it wasn't.
No.
But all of the dead, they look completely inconsistent. It looked like you gave 5 people $140, sent them off to Target and said, make skeleton costumes. Some looked like they were just skeletons. Some looked like they were like fat guys in like black plastic suits with bones like taped onto them. It just looked bad, but I think you're right. If they tried to do a quality skeleton, it wouldn't fit with the tone of the movie.
Yeah, but that's not really what the tone of the movie is going for. Like, the movie is trying to be intentionally campy, right? Like, it's like when the skeletons appear, they're doing like Three Stooges stuff, and Bruce Campbell, again, he's mugging, he's overacting, he's purposefully doing that. I find Bruce Campbell a little bit more charming when he's tones it down a little bit. Like when he's trying to say the words, he kind of coughs his way through the third. I find that's more fun to me. I also, though, do like the skeletons and these side characters that are obviously fake, especially by today's standards, but they're just doing weird, silly things like the Gremlins and Gremlins 2 and that kind of stuff I like.
But there's a whole series of jokes that the skeletons make about their bones, and they have some female slaves that they say, oh, we've got something for you to do.
Yeah.
Are we led to believe that the skeletons are somehow trying to have sex with the girls?
Well, they're trying to give her a bone for sure.
Yeah, they're all, everybody in this movie is a fucking pervert. Except for, oddly, Lord Arthur seems to be like, okay.
and who's the other one? The wizard.
Duke Henry?
Yeah, Duke Henry. He's doing fine.
The wise man doesn't have a name. He's literally just credited as wise man. But, I really wanted to stop the movie at this point. The break point for me is when Ashe is trying to choose between the 3 books. And he opens the first one that's like a portal and he gets sucked into it. He comes out, he's got that big, long rubber face. And he like shakes it. And then it comes out a little bit different. He's like pushing on his face and then, it gets straight. And I'm just like, is this really happening? We're doing cartoon sound effects and bad jokes. And it was testing my patience at this point. I didn't quit on it, but I really wanted to.
Do you think the Evil Dead would be better as a cartoon? Especially they've remade Ashe versus the Evil Dead, which is a series, and that's actually quite good. It has a real budget and it's kind of over the top, and it's a little more horror and comedy. It's a little bit more throwback to more Evil Dead 1, Evil Dead 2 than Army of Darkness. But could you, with the advent of more adult cartoons today, like Big Mouth and others, do you think that this would translate better as a cartoon?
I don't know. I'm not a big cartoon fan, so I might be the wrong guy to ask. I just don't really like animated series. But I think that slasher or horror genre, it has to have that darkness, kind of what people complain about with Game of Thrones, as far as the long night, not being able to see stuff, that pervasive gloom and darkness on the set, I think is necessary. And it's really hard to do animation that looks that way. Normally when you see cartoons, they're always very bright palettes. So, possibly, but I really like it as a movie where you can clearly see shit makes no sense. Why are skeletons moving behind cover? What the fuck is that all about? Who knows? I don't know. Why are they poking at skeletons with swords? Who knows? Don't know.
Ashe becomes determined to lead the humans against the Army of Darkness, and the people reluctantly agree, using knowledge from textbooks in his 1973 Oldsmobile Delta 88 and enlisting the help of Duke Henry. Ashe successfully leads the medieval soldiers to victory over the Deadites and evil Ashe, saves Sheila, and brings peace between Arthur and Henry. The wise man tells him how to return to the present by giving him a potion after reciting the phrase.
So I found myself thinking, this is Game of Thrones. This is the long night.
Right.
We've got the army of the dead. They're approaching the castle. The human enemy, they band together to fight the dead. They're building defenses. They have 2 days to train up the common folk. I think if you swap out the Delta 88 for some dragons, this felt like the same result, but maybe a little bit better.
Yeah, I actually had that written down in my note, and I couldn't include it because I was like, this is season 8, episode 3 of Game of Thrones. This is the long night. And I feel like this is a little bit more easy to understand and follow, like you said, Big T. But this is also what I love about Sam Raimi is there's multiple times in the movie. The first one is when he's forging the hand, which thank God he does because it's so obvious. It's his hand is covered up. But when they're kind of doing like the A-Team montage, and Sam Raimi does this also with the car when they're kind of building this tank, steam powered Delta 88. I don't know. It was kind of fun, but that kind of stuff was fun. That kind of stuff was enjoyable. But how are you then also utilizing it to make boomstick bullets?
Yeah, I'm a little confused. At the beginning of the movie, you see Ashe, and he's using his shotgun shells pretty liberally, like just to do tricks, and not even like kill things. Like he's just shooting it in the air, and I'm like, dude, he's gonna run out of shells here in a second. He never runs out of ammunition. Like if I were transported back in the Middle Ages with my boomstick, I would only fire it when like absolutely necessary. More just to scare the shit out of people. Don't let them know how many, shells you actually have, or save it for when, I don't know, like there's a giant winged beast going to steal your girl. Like that might be a bigger time. But when they open up the Delta 88, you see that he's got a few extra shells in the trunk of his car, but that's not enough for a lifetime or even a week at the rate he's going. Ashe doesn't give a fuck. And maybe it's because he doesn't plan to be there very long, but he definitely needs to learn some conservation of ammunition.
But again, at least Ashe is more useful than Bran. Ashe teaches them how to make gunpowder.
That's right.
Bran knows the future. He doesn't even fucking tell them. Doesn't tell them anyway. Hey, Daenerys, she's going to go kind of crazy. Spoiler alert. She's going to go a bit crazy.
We talked about how like Bruce Campbell, when he tones it down and the subtle humor, I think is better than kind of like the outlandish cartoonish. When he's giving the speech and he's trying to like rouse up the people, and he gives the great speech, and you expect everyone to like hold up their weapons and go, yes. They just kind of all like look at him. But then there is a guy, Big D, you mentioned Andy Dick's character in Cable Guy when they go to Medieval Times. There is a guy who says, you can count on my steel, that looks exactly like Andy Dick's character, and more so than even Lord Arthur. And I wonder if that was the inspiration for Andy Dick's character in the Cable Guy was that one character. He's like, you can count on my steel. And it's just kind of a throwaway character. He's not in any other scene, but it's hilarious. And again, I think that adds to the charm of this movie.
They probably wanted Andy Dick, but then he realized that all they were paying these people was like craft service sandwiches. This entire they're terrible. This movie it's Bruce Campbell, and then everybody else is just there to support Bruce Campbell. Like that's what this movie is. There's no other talent in this film. I can't identify a single person. Fucking Lord Henry. I don't know what that like weird smudge like turpentine is in his beard. Everybody's costumes look like they were bought out of the Spirit Halloween the day before. But what I really don't get is you mentioned Game of Thrones and how, there was a definite idea here. We got to survive and kill, the White Walkers and kill the Night King. That's the idea. In this, I was like, okay, so they're trying to protect the book, but like for how long and what's the idea? So I'm like, maybe they protect the Necronomicon until dawn, and somehow dawn, like in every other horror movie, will purge the evil or something like that. And then I was like, okay, maybe it's because they need to figure out how to defeat the Army of Darkness. The climactic resolution of this movie is Ashe has to blow up evil Ashe. That's it. That's what ends everything. So he puts him on a satchel charge on a catapult, shoots him up into the air. The thing explodes. Magically, Sheila's turned back to normal. No explanation there.
Yeah.
Didn't he throw her off the castle?
Yeah.
What?
Well, yes, he threw Sheila off the fucking.
Oh yeah, but she's fine now.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
The evil spirit or the evil STD that evil Ashe gave to her to turn her into evil Sheila, I guess, number one, saved her from being pushed off the top, while also simultaneously, when that's destroyed, she goes back to normal. Wouldn't that be great though if that was the same for like normal real life STDs? Is if you killed the person who gave you the STD, then the STD would go away.
That I would love that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I'd be in prison, but
I feel like there'd be less STDs in the world
and less people.
Yeah. It's a win-win.
Yeah, that's actually how HIV would kill everybody on the planet. Not because of transmission rates, but because of murder. And then once you see Sheila turn back to normal, what do the Deadites do? They start retreating. Like, where are they going? Like, are they going back to their skeleton homes to just hang out? They're like, they literally say, we better get out of here. They start running away. I'm like, you're a fucking possessed skeleton. Why don't you just keep fighting? What is that all about?
Yeah, but they're like you got the skeletons that are like playing bone flutes. You got like a whole regiment of ones that are in kilts playing the bagpipes. And they're hilarious. I love the skeletons in this movie.
And speaking of inconsistency, the horses are just normal horses, which must be terrified. Like they're like, oh shit, there's all these dead guys all around me. And then you get the, also accents. Apparently, if you're dead, you don't have an accent, but if you're living, you do. It's the Middle Ages, whatever.
It's perfect. Well, back in the present, Ashe recounts a story to a fellow employee at the S-Mart department store as he talks to a woman who is interested in his story, a surviving Deadite allowed to come into the present because Ashe, again, forgot the last word, attacks the customers. Ashe kills it using a Winchester rifle from the sporting goods department and exclaims, "Hail to the king, baby," before passionately kissing the woman. End movie.
So part of our job here on this podcast is to go back and look not only at the movie, but the time frame that it was made in. When Ashe appears back in the department store and he's telling the story, I'm looking at his outfit and his 90s, everyone wore that exaggerated, oversized, like sports coat. His S-Mart uniform, it looked like 3 sizes too big. I kept expecting him to like rip it off like an NBA, the breakaway pants or the shirts, and he was going to have something underneath. No, that was just 90s fashion. Why the hell did we do that in the 90s? Why did I wear Jenko jeans that were 3 sizes too big?
It's so everybody could hide their rifle holsters on their legs so they could spin their cowboy rifle and then slip it right into the holster there. That's the thing though is going back to Evil Dead the musical is that you see this consistently. Like it's definitely something people noticed because if you look at all the stage productions, the guys are wearing those same outfits, like the horrible trousers, that oversized like blue polyester shirt. It's a trademark look, even when he's got his armor on, he's still got it on underneath. It's perfect.
Yeah. Well, it's in the 90s, it was as big of coats as you can get, the bigger the shoulder pads, and then also the more pleats you could fit on a pair of pants, the better.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
That meant you had money.
Yeah. But this is like the Blade Runner of campy horror comedy films, because there are 3 versions of this film. I get so excited. I've talked about this before on other podcasts. I get so excited when I start a movie and I see that it's only 90 minutes. Because I'm like, oh, this isn't going to take all of my day. Well, this is barely like an episode of Game of Thrones. It's 81 minutes. Yep. So it barely qualifies as a movie, but it's a tight movie. It goes by pretty fast. However, there was an international release with additional longer scenes that were released overseas. And then also there's a director's cut that I guess you can get on Blu-ray that make a little bit more sense. Like there's a longer scene of him fighting his twin. There's actually a sex scene. And there's this original ending that is completely different than kind of the tone that they took with the US theatrical release.
Right. The original ending of the movie, Ashe, he gets this potion from the wise man and he's supposed to just drink it and then, return to his own time. But he miscounts the amount of potion needed. And so he wakes up in a post-apocalyptic future where human civilization has been destroyed. And he realizes that basically he like overslept. It's like a Rip Van Winkle sort of thing.
Yeah.
And Universal Pictures like objected to this. They thought it was too negative and they wanted the more optimistic ending, which they filmed, which involves a guy, basically shooting a woman to death in a department store.
I know. That was the optimistic ending?
Well, there's a kiss at the end.
Yeah, exactly. Oh. Yeah, this is a hero's victory. But this was a different time. I mean, this was the 90s, guys. Like, this didn't happen on the regular. Like you were happy that they sold guns at S-Mart back in the 90s. Now you're like,
a work shooting turned into an aphrodisiac. She got him to hook up.
Well, it also depends on if you were wearing an oversized coat at the same time. But like, without this ending, you couldn't have had the Showtime series Ashe versus the Evil Dead on Showtime, which I highly recommend. If you haven't seen it, you haven't seen any of the episodes?
I've been meaning to watch it because everything I've seen from it, like clip wise, looks fantastic.
Yeah, really
and
good.
It seems like the show. It seems like Evil Dead done right. It's just the right balance. I think it's right in my wheelhouse. But I haven't gotten a chance to watch it. And again, what's really great about it too is Bruce Campbell is now much older, obviously, but still, again, talk about the charisma. Like he's still got it, baby.
It's very self-aware. It's very meta. A lot of the humor works, and Bruce Campbell, like again, he's playing the same character. And he's aware that it's the same character. It's just, again, if you haven't, and if you're a fan of the Evil Dead series and you haven't watched the show, I highly recommend checking it out.
Are there any scenes of Ashe surfing on carts or Deadites doing trampoline tricks? Any of that?
It's been a while since I've seen it. I haven't watched the entire series. I think I watched through season 2. But there's a lot of just goofy antics. There's lots of blood. You talk about the blood that they had at the musical. It's over the top blood splattering, all that kind of stuff. It really is, I think, what Evil Dead was supposed to be. So we live in the golden age of television. People, take advantage of it. Check it out. Well, with that being said, now's the time of the podcast where we break out our Shat meters and give you our wipe scores. If you've never listened to the podcast before, a 0 wipe movie is when battling a skeleton and you take your chainsaw and you run it through them and it's just a clean cut and there's no splattering or anything like that. But a 5 wipe movie is when you behead your ex-girlfriend or your evil twin incarnate and then blood is splattered. It shoots up and just gets all over everywhere. It's just a mess. So,
but no STDs.
No STDs. 0 wipe good, 5 wipe bad. We'll start with you, Big D. How many wipes do you give Evil Dead 3, The Army of Darkness?
I'm surprised. I got to be honest, because I started this. I was not optimistic. I think it's slightly better than average. It tries to be original. It's very self-aware. It knows its strengths and limitations. It's surprisingly fun. I think the 82-minute runtime helps out. It left me actually wanting to go back and watch Evil Dead 1 and 2, and then even some of the television series. So for that, it's a success. At 82 minutes, man, it was fun. It doesn't try to be something it's not. So I think 2.25 wipes. I can't give it 2 wipes because I think that's too good, but it's a little better than average. So 2.25.
I think that's our first quarter score that we've ever.
No.
Yeah, Carrie tried to do it a couple times and I raised hell.
Yeah,
like, absolutely not. We're not going into quarter wipe territory. God damn it. I think she did anyway.
No, I'm guilty. I've been doing that for quite a while. I stopped once Gene objected.
I agree with you, Big D. I think it's campy fun. One interesting thing that we didn't touch on is that there's really not a lot of dialogue in the second and third acts. It's really just emoting and action. And for that, it definitely shows its age. We talked about the CGI kind of being very Willow-esque. And it's not the best of the Evil Dead series, which, again, I contend is Evil Dead 2. But, I can't say it enough. Bruce Campbell is charming. I love the skeletons. But ultimately, at the end of the day, I think this is an average movie when you compare it to all the other movies we've done on this podcast now, which is almost 150 movies. I will say, though, the cover art is 0 wipes. So if you're a fan of movie posters and you don't have Army of Darkness one framed on your wall, go and get it now because it is perfect movie poster. So for that, I think it's right down the middle. I think it's a 2.5 wipe. I think it's slightly worse than your score, Big D. So 2.5 from me. That leaves you, Gene. Round us out. Give us our final Shat score. How many wipes do you give Army of Darkness?
Raj, I'm right on board with you at 2.5 wipes. Was I entertained? Yes. Was the movie well made? Not really. This was my favorite in the Evil Dead series growing up. I liked 3 better than 1 and 2, but I'm getting too old for this shit. As you mentioned, the cartooniness, the Three Stooges, blocking the eye poke from the skeleton by putting your hand across the bridge of your nose. It's just not working for me. I much prefer Evil Dead as a series of iconic moments and phrases. As Chris Powers mentioned, Ashe is so quotable. There are scenes that are so perfectly done. And there are moments where I did laugh out loud, where like a line was dropped perfectly or a physical gag really worked. But this isn't a fantastic cinematic work. It has shown its age. For me, The Evil Dead, the musical, it was a much better use of time. And for that, it's 2.5 wipes.
All right. So if we take our 2.5 wipes and add that to Big D's 2.25 wipes, which I don't even know if we should allow, but if we were to add up all three and divide by 3 and that gives our final overall Shat score, what is that, Gene?
I mean, those quarter wipes are really good as tiebreakers, I guess, and it makes sure that we have some, a little bit more spread between our rankings. So altogether, our scores average out to very close to what Chris Powers predicted at 2.416 repeating wipes for Army of Darkness.
And if we were to compare that Shat score against the other movies that we've done in the pantheon of Shat, where does that leave, or where does that rank Army of Darkness, Big D?
So that is now tied in the 68 spot, which shows I have done quarter scores before because I gave Halloween a 0.75.
Yeah.
So this ties it now in 68 with Halloween. It is better than The Fifth Element, Weekend at Bernie's. It is worse than Point Break, Casino, and Demolition Man.
Perfect.
I think Weekend at Bernie's is a far superior movie than Army of Darkness.
I think it's a part of your soul that's in Weekend at Bernie's. Like that is, if somebody said, what is Roger? I would say, go watch Weekend at Bernie's. That's his insides.
Yeah. I mean, listen, it's getting to the point now where just like there's so little room between these movies, and it's getting very difficult but I think the system still works.
I think this is the closest we've come to a unanimous vote in quite a while, though.
Yep.
Yeah, outside of our 0 wipes. Yeah, this is pretty close. Well, now it's time for the podcast where we give our shout outs and tell you our upcoming I guess we've already told you what we're doing in our Halloween spooktacular, but we have a couple shout outs, Gene, because we've been away for a few weeks because we banked a lot while I was on vacation. How many shout outs do we have to give, and what exactly is a shout out?
Raj, a shout out is our way of saying thank you for going to shatthemovies.com, visiting our website, checking in with us, letting us know what movies you'd like to see, checking our back catalog. If you go to shatthemovies.com and you'll see a little slider that says get a shout out, you can put your name in there and we'll read it on the podcast. This week's shout outs go out to Justin Gem, Steven, Mike Ock.
Oh, you got us.
I get it.
Joseph Rogan, the other Joe Rogan. Anita Handjob. Raider Tank, Gilbert Victoria Concordia Crescent Flores, obviously a gunner, Deanna from Jackson, Florida, Handsome Rob, Mark Hutchison, aka Hutcho from Melbourne, Australia, We'll see, a bouncy pair of Bristols, and Neil Borman. Thanks, everybody, for visiting the website and giving us your shout outs. We also have a very special shout out that goes out to Brody. Hi, Brody. This is a shout out just for you. And her mom wrote in and said, hi, guys, I'm a big fan and you gave me a shout out a while back. I let my kid hear it. And although I don't let her listen to the podcast, she's begging for her very own shout out. She tried through the webpage every week. It makes me check on the new podcast to see if she's gotten a mention. She's 10 years old. Her name is Brody. And yes, she's named after Chief Brody. So if you could give her a mention, you'll make a young movie buff's year and give this old bird a break. Keep up the good work and much love from across the pond in Belfast. So, Brody, big shout out to you. Thanks for listening to at least limited minutes of Shat the Movies. And maybe when we do Shat on Kids, we'll do one just for you.
And Brody, why don't you call the voicemail line? If you leave us a voicemail line telling us about one of your favorite movies from the 80s or 90s, we might be able to play that for you.
What is that phone number, Big D?
So that phone number would be 914-719-SHAT. So give that a call and have your mom do it. Leave us a voicemail. Tell us movies you like. We'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, Brody would be interested to know that one of my first jobs as a kid, when I was 16 years old, I drove the Jaws boat at Universal Studios. It's no longer there in Florida because they replaced it with Harry Potter World. But I still have nightmares. I still have flashbacks of doing 3 boat rotations where, I would start off my spiel by saying, welcome aboard. You are fully protected by this 40 millimeter grenade launcher and the fact that we haven't seen a great white in these waters in over 25 years. Amity 6 to base, come in base. So yeah, the spiel is still just embedded in my brain from doing all those turns.
I can just see Brody right now listening and going, "Oh, crazy old men mumbling shit."
Yeah.
We're there, man. We're hitting 40.
We're hitting. There it is.
Roger knows how to relate to the kids. But yes, that phone number is 914-719-7428. So give a call, leave a voicemail. But Roger, also next week's movies.
Yes.
It is not set yet. There is a voting category, so you can still go onto the website and vote. The movies that are up for contention is 1981's Halloween 2, Creepshow, Friday the 13th, Part 2, Child's Play, Hellraiser, and The Shining. So go and vote. But before we cut out here, we haven't done these in a while, and we're going to try to go through because we have some. We have a voicemail that we're going to play.
Oh, nice.
And this voicemail is requesting a movie. So here we go.
Hey, I love Shat The Movies. It's a great podcast. The reason I'm calling is I noticed you guys aren't dating Beth anymore. And I was wondering if you'd mind if I would take her for a drink next week. 'Cause everybody wants some too. And I want Better Off Dead on an episode, please. Thank you.
Gene, I think that was aimed directly at you.
Because of Better Off Dead?
Yeah, you've been pushing for that since day one.
Oh, yeah. I mean, listen, Better Off Dead shaped my idea of what cool was for the first, half of my life. Cusack is still the fucking man. I would watch that. Yeah. Oh, God. The scene, the dance scene where the fat kid's jumping for the balloon, the ski scenes, the entire, as we mentioned earlier on this podcast, the language of love, the international language with Peru and French fries and French bread. Fucking, that movie is genius.
I'm embarrassed to say I probably was Ricky in high school. That probably was me.
Is that his name?
I don't believe that. Yeah, Ricky. I don't believe that for a second.
That's a real shame when folks be throwing away a perfectly good white boy like that.
Yeah. I always miss the opportunity. I wanted to be the $2 kid for Halloween, but the one year that I thought to do it, I realized that it's really hard to go trick or treating on a bicycle, and also people don't like you throwing newspapers at them. So missed opportunity.
I'm really sorry your mom blew up Ricky.
Oh yes, we have to do that. Come on, somebody
We just did.
The whole movie. It's great. It is great.
Anyway, yeah, you can take her out. It's fine with me.
That concludes this week's episode of Shat the Movies. Be sure to follow us on social media and share with a friend. We're everywhere, including Twitter, Snapchat, and Instagram. Just follow at Shat the Movies. We're also on Facebook until Facebook is finally broken up and deleted from existence. God, I really hope that happens soon. But you can find us there as well. Just search for Shat the Movies on Facebook. Our website where you can vote on upcoming movies is shatthemovies.com. You can email us your suggestions for upcoming movie categories by emailing us hosts with an S at shatthemovies.com. You can support the podcast multiple different ways. You can donate through our PayPal and Venmo accounts through commissions. You can also complete a survey to help us find potential advertisers. Just complete the survey on our link there on the website. You can also shop on Amazon through our affiliate link that gives us little pennies of every purchase that you make on Amazon. We're everywhere fine podcasts can be found, including iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, YouTube, Spotify, Pandora. You can subscribe. And if you stop by iTunes, please be sure to leave a 5-star review. And listen, we really try not to get political. And when we do, we make fun of ourselves. So can we stop with the 1 or 2 stars? Oh, I love the podcast, but the social justice warriors. Like, come on, guys. Really?
So do you really think somebody who's going to write us a social justice comment has made it to the last seconds of the podcast?
Probably not.
Yeah, they didn't hear the Mighty Mouse music this week, so they're like, all right, you fuckers, when's it going to happen? And they would just,
there it is.
Hey, that's for you.
You can also check out our sister podcast, Shat on TV, where we review television series such as Westworld, Taboo, American Gods, Game of Thrones, True Detective, and soon, upcoming, our favorite, Watchmen. It looks really good. If you haven't checked it out, I was perusing Amazon the other day, and they make a Rorschach mask that I guess as you breathe, it changes the shape. Have you seen this, Gene? Looks pretty badass.
I have not, but just a pro tip to everybody. So I actually was Rorschach for Halloween in 2008. So it was before the Zack Snyder movie came out, and they didn't have like Rorschach masks you could buy.
Yeah.
So I took a Sharpie and a pair of white pantyhose, and I did the Rorschach pattern on the face and pulled it over my head and went out with that all night drinking gin, not realizing that I was inhaling the Sharpie fumes, threw up in my own nylon on my own face. And I was thrown into a car that was parked to the side of the road because my friends thought that would be the safest place for me to be because they threw me out of the club. And so they basically just opened up a random car door and put me in the back seat to sleep it off. So that was awesome. So moral of the story is don't go dressed as Rorschach for Halloween.
Was it a 78 Delta 88? 76 Delta 88?
God, I wish. I was back there with my Steam magazine, just beating it and vomiting on myself.
Well, on behalf of Mike O's, Big D, Dick Ebert, and Gene Klaatu Verata Lions, I'm Roger Roper. Be sure to join us next week for the following Shat The Movies Spooktacular review. That being said, thank you so much for listening. Take care, good night, and good luck.
Here's Johnny. I'm coming down.
Come and play with us.